Jesus said in John chapter 12, "And I, if I be lifted up from the earth, will draw all men unto me." That's what Jesus said. And that's what we're trying to do here at Emmanuel. Hello, my name's Pastor Bob Gray, and I'm glad that you've taken the time to join us for one of our services. Our goal here at Emmanuel is to lift up Christ, to lift him up so high that no matter where you're at right now, he will draw you closer to him. That's our goal. May you enjoy the services of Emmanuel. And if I can be of service to you, please let me know. God bless you. Enjoy the. Hey, Job, if you will. And last week we started about dealing with depression, dealing with a depressed family member, or when depression comes. And we're going to go back and we're going to look at, I'm not going to recover a lot of ground because I really think that we need to get into it. If you'll go to Job chapter 1, and there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And that man was, and it tells us a couple of things, that man was perfect, that man was upright, one that feared God, and eschewed evil. Perfect just means morally complete, physically complete. This word means that when you look at him, it is like, wow, that guy's got it all together. Or if it was a lady, that lady has it all together. This is what perfect means. From the outside, you have it all together. Then it gets into somebody that was upright. It truly means that the knee-jerk reaction was to do right. He didn't have to decide. This was Job. Job's whole entire thing was this. The knee-jerk reaction was to do what was right. Then it says fear God. There was this reverence toward the Almighty. This was who Job was, and you're going to find out that we find eschewed evil. Eschewed evil simply means this: if evil, I use it like if evil is that microphone, then he would go all the way around evil to not even be close to it. This was who Job was. Well, then the news comes, and God says, "Have you considered my servant Job?" The reason that I believe that Job was never considered in the narrative of Satan was because the hedge was so high around Job. I truly believe that when Satan went through, and in fact, if you'll look at it, verse 6, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, "Whence comest thou?" Then Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it." And the Lord said unto Satan, now remember, this is in keeping, when it says walking up and down, this is in keeping with what it says over in the epistles, that he seeketh whom he may what? So Satan then, where'd you come from? He said, well, I was walking to and fro. His whole purpose hasn't changed since the beginning of time. If you have a chronological Bible, Job is one of the earliest writings in the Bible. This is an early writing. And by the way, don't get a chronological Bible unless you're ready for your brain to be tested. How many know what I'm talking about? Brother Winger, it's tough on the reading, isn't it? Because like, no, you're not supposed to be there yet. But this was, so Satan came back and said, well, have you considered my servant Job? Well, if you keep reading here, and Satan answered the Lord and said, doth Job fear God for naught? Hast not thou made, verse 10, an hedge about him? You know what? He said, why should I even consider a person I can't even get to? So this was why God had to say, well, what about my servant Job? And Satan said, yeah, good luck. I'll just stop and tell you this. What he was saying here, doth Job serve thee for naught? He was saying, it's a mutual admiration society. You keep blessing Job, and he keeps being a good little boy. And listen to this. This was Job's life. And Satan said, yeah, take that hedge down. And so we know that the hedge was taken down. And it said in verse 11, but put forth thy hand now and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, behold, all that he hath is in thy power. Only upon him put not forth thy hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. Now let's talk about difficulties. Let's talk about tough times. Satan, we know, goes in the tough time around Job.
Most people do not want to admit that they have gone through depression. Most people do not want to admit that there have been times when it has just zeroed in on their life and that they have no motivation to get out of bed and they have no motivation to pick up the phone. They hide. They don't want to be found. And I will tell you that whenever you talk about things like this, people are like, why doesn't somebody talk about this biblically more? And I think the reason is because we are Christians. And everybody knows that Christians never get depressed. Don't you know that? You are the greatest people on this earth. You are. But I'll tell you this, that here you have somebody who had it all, lost it all around him. Now, there's a difference. We talked about this last week, but I want to move on. There's a difference between losing everything around you. Job lost it all. Satan put his hand forth. Verse 13 through verse 18, you're going to find out that he loses everything. Verse number 19. So when he loses everything, would you please go to verse 20? Verse 20. Look what it says. Then Job arose and rent his mantle and shaved his head and fell down upon the ground and what, please? Worshipped. And his conclusion of everything that went wrong around him was this. Naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Look at verse 22. In all this Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. Now let's go to chapter 2. Now we have another day. Please don't equate going through difficulties that you automatically are depressed. Okay? Here Job went through difficulties. He lost everything financially. He lost all of his future with his children. He lost all of his finances with his oxen that made money for him. He lost it all. But Job had this unique ability to go to a dark place in sorrow, as you find out if you'll look at verse number 20. He went to a dark place in sorrow because he rent his mantle, he shaved his head, and he fell down on the ground. But this is what makes him upright. His reaction was he worshiped. Y'all, you're going to go through difficult times. And I think the assumption when you go through difficult times that, oh my goodness, you must be really depressed. I will tell you this, difficult times, we can handle difficult times. Lose it around you, you can handle it. But now all of a sudden, Satan comes back to God in verse number 1. And there was a day when sons of God came and presented themselves before the Lord. And Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said unto Satan, From whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord, From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down. The Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright, one that feareth God and escheweth evil. And still, would you notice that little verse right there, that little word, and still he holdeth fast his integrity, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. And Satan answered the Lord and said, Skin for skin. Yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. But put forth thy hand now, and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, he is thine. He is in thy hand, but save his life. So went Satan from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with sore boils. Please look at the wording. From the sole of his foot unto his crown. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. It is one thing to lose the things around you, including your children. I have never lost a child, but I have friends who have. And I've seen them rebound incredibly. That's one thing. But then all of a sudden, when you lose who you are, when something changes in your life to where you lose who you are, because notice, if you will, that here he loses in his physical appearance. He had these boils everywhere. He was scraping them. And then now you have somebody that no longer is physically attractive. You have somebody that no longer can walk any place he wants to walk. He now is confined to an ash heap with potsherds, and now he doesn't look visibly attractive. In Job, where he was in the gate, where people stood up, where he was the life of the party, now he is not. And now all of a sudden, another caveat, if you will, please look at verse 9. Then said his wife unto him, Dost thou still retain thy integrity? Curse God and die. But he said unto her, Thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. Men, I don't suggest that your next note you write your wife that you put on there Job 2:10. Okay? But he said to her, Thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God? Shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job... No. Everybody knows depression is because you're in sin. How many times have we heard that? But I want you to notice where this man is at. This man is about as dark as you're going to get. But guess what he never did? He never sinned. I have heard my fellow brethren, my fellow pastors, and there were a couple of them that caught the broadcast last week, and they were like, have you lost your mind? And I told them this. If somebody doesn't start teaching on this, then we're going to be in trouble. And America is already going through a dark place. And we have to be able to look at it biblically. When somebody is going to a dark place and they start losing this value on the inside, do not automatically assume that they're in some type of sin. That is a wrong conclusion to draw. Because there are times when all of a sudden, physically, Job was not who he used to be. Financially, Job was not who he used to be. Family, he was not who he used to be. And you will have people in your life that when they start losing around you, what is that solution? How do you deal with people who start losing things around you? I'm going to give you some preliminary thoughts, and then I'm going to get into the new lesson here. I will tell you this, don't assume anything. Don't play psychiatrist. Don't play psychologist. But I will tell you that his friends, we come to the end of chapter 2. Now, when Job's 3 friends heard of all this, verse 11, that all this evil that was come upon him, they came unto everyone from his own place, Eliphaz from the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Naamathite, and they had made what? An appointment together to come to what? Mourn with him and to comfort him. And when they lifted up their eyes afar off, look at that, and what? Knew him not. His life had so changed physically, this is not even the same guy. This guy's going through it. And when you have friends that start losing around them, please don't take lightly loss. Loss is loss. And when you start losing a job, when you start losing children, when you start losing a house, I didn't realize how much a house means to somebody until you have to walk away. Now, I've only had to walk away from one house that I've owned, and I didn't realize how much you are on default that that's where you go. Man, for the first couple of months, I would leave the church and end up at the house we used to live at, and I'd pull up, and I can remember pulling up in the driveway going, what is strange cars doing in my house? And I found myself shutting the truck off and going, oh, Bob, you don't live here. And old Mrs. Wood that lives there, she's going to shoot you if you get out and try to come in. Then you get this thought, I wonder if my key still works. No, so I haven't been to try out. I'm waiting for them to leave. No, I'm kidding. Watch, their house is going to get burglarized, and I'm going to be in trouble. Brother Summerford, stop it. And so understand that now the friends are like, okay, we have to do something. When your friends start going through it, and this is why we randomize the teenagers over there, so they will stay with the group they're with, but they need to keep moving. And I'm going to tell you why. They need to expand their friendships. They need to be able to get out of their kingdom and get out of their comfort zone, and they need to be able to expand. Please don't come to church and not expand your friendships. I'm going to tell you why. Because there may come a day when the people you meet start losing, And they need to be able to get a phone call and say, look, I know you're going through a tough time. And let's stop ignoring the elephant in the room. We have a special needs son. The worst thing you can ever do to a special need parent is ignore their kid like they don't exist. And let me tell you, if your friend's going through it, don't withdraw from your friend. And don't get nosy, because look at what the friends did. Boy, this is so insightful. And when they lifted up their eyes afar off and knew him not, they lifted up the voice, and they rent everyone his mantle, sprinkled dust upon their heads toward heaven. Verse 13's key. So they sat down with him upon the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and none spake a word unto him, for they saw that his grief was very great. The best thing y'all can ever do for friends is just be there. Is just say, hey, I'm available. I know you're hurting. I cannot imagine you're hurt. I just want you to know I'm here if you need me. A lot of times Job's friends take a tough hit. I wrote this down in my study notes here. Good friends, good end, because Job bounced back. Weak premises. We have a chance here to learn from the friends on two ends. We have the chance to learn what did they do that caused Job to bounce back. And what was their premise that they should have stayed away from? It's all found right here in these chapters. And again, I don't know how many lessons I'm going to give on this. I know I'm supposed to give this second lesson because I kind of didn't finish the first one. So now we come to chapter 3. Job starts opening his mouth. I'm going to very quickly go through here, and we are right on time. Job starts opening his mouth, and when he opens his mouth, verse 1 through verse 10, Job wanted his birthday to be a day that never existed on the calendar. He said, I don't like that day. I don't like the day I came out. Verse number 11 and 12, and you let your eyes kind of drift there. Job wishes that out of the womb, he never would have been caught. He said, the knees prevented me. I was given sustenance that I might make it. You know what he wished? If you would have just left me on the ground after I was born, that would have been much better than what I'm going through now. Look at how deep this goes. Verse number 13 through 19. Job was seeking what everybody else finally had. The past princes had it. The kings had it. The infants who died at birth had it. Even the wicked had it. Even the prisoner had it. You know what it was? Rest. Rest. Death brings freedom from pain. And that's what Job was saying. He could have handled if this would have been, but when this started to happen to him, when all of a sudden he no longer had his looks, he no longer had his mobility, he no longer could go anywhere and be respected, and when you don't feel like you're being respected, let me tell you something, it's like I wish I was never born. I wish my mama would have just dropped me on the ground and walked off. I wish my date didn't exist on the calendar, and when I walk past the graveyards, regardless of the age and regardless of why they died, as a prisoner, as a prince, they got it much better than I got it. And you keep walking all the way through, and then you come down to verse number 20 through 22. Job was perplexed as to why God gives life to a person who wants to die. He said this in verse 21 and verse 22, I dig for death. I rejoice exceedingly, verse 22, when I find a graveyard. But I stand outside of finality and death and wonder this, God, why don't you just take me? Do you know, let's just get very honest here. There are members of our family as believers that know they're saved and know they're going to go to heaven when they die. That life is so dark for them that they are like, God, why don't you just let me die? God, why do you let me wake up in the morning? And if depression ever drops below putting this in God's hands, then they will put it in their own hands. And this is why it is incumbent upon all of us to make friends. Please, I was today, and I'm not quite sure how this is going to go, but I was involved in a study with Harvard, the Harvard Institute, and I was on a Zoom call for an hour today. And the professor on the other end of the call said this, could you explain to me, your pastor number 81 that I've interviewed, can you explain to me why Hebrews 10:25 is so important? And I said, absolutely. I said, let's look at it this way. God creates the entire world. Animal, plant, sea, everything, mankind. All of this is God's creation. God loves His creation. But the only one of this creation that brought sin in was man. When man sinned, now God had to send His Son to redeem man to get back. So God loves His creation. God's not mad. John 3:16, 17, 18, 19 tells us that God's not mad. God loves. He wants man back. He already has the animals, and he wants man back. So He sends Jesus. So once somebody trusts Christ as their Savior, they go from being a creation to a relation. Now they become part of this family. Now this family is all about being part of the family of God, not the creation of God, but the family of God. All family needs a kitchen table to sit around. This is why we have church. He says, so the big deal about assembling is what? And I said, about as big of a deal as going home by yourself. Why do you think singles want to get married? Why do you think people that walk into an empty house is like, no, I can't do this anymore? This is why we need church. And I'm begging you, don't just come in just in time for church. This is a family. And family needs for this not just to be a hotel. The thing I must always remember about my house is that my wife lost her son, lost her daughter, and caretakes a special needs son, and coming up on May 7th, it'll be for 30 years. Well, all this time, I've been running in and out. I'm running in and out. And I must remember, my home is not a hotel. It's not a restaurant. It's where my family is. And please know this, that church is not just a place you come to punch in and punch out. We don't have time clocks there in the pew. Okay? You don't get paid by the hour you sit in the pew. And it is hours if you're a Baptist. This is why, make up your mind to get here 15, 20 minutes early and walk around and shake people's hands. And when all of a sudden you pick up on, okay, something's not right, plop down in the pew and just say, hey, you okay? Are you okay? Can I pray with you? He said, my house should be called a house of prayer. What is prayer? Prayer is taking and going to God on behalf of somebody else. So here you have this, and then you go down to Job 3:23. Job wanted to know, why is man not permitted to die? Look at verse 24. His grief has replaced his meals. Look at verse 25. Job always had a mental disposition of fear that something bad was going to happen. Look at verse 26. Job is expressing here that the swiftness which with trouble came. Now let's drop all the way down. This was Job's chapter 3. Let's go to chapter 4. Well, how do you deal? We talked about last week communing. Now, what do you say? What do you say? If you'll look, please, at Job chapter 4 and verse number 3. His friends said this to him. Eliphaz was the first friend to speak. Eliphaz was a good friend with a good conclusion, but he had weak premises. But it's a good friend. And here's one of the good things that he said. Look at Job chapter 4, verse 3. Behold, thou hast what, please, instructed many. Thou hast strengthened the weak hands. Thy words have upholden him that was falling. Thou hast strengthened the feeble knees. What he was saying was this, because go back to chapter 3 and verse number 1, because look at what his friend said to him versus what he said to his friend. Job 3:1, and after this, opened Job his mouth and cursed his day. And Job spake and said, let the day perish where I was born. You know what his friend was saying? If you were never born, you could never have helped people. Job, look at what his friend said. His friend did not waller with him. His friend simply said, no, Job, that's not true. Look at verse 3 and 4. Behold, thou hast instructed many. Thou hast strengthened the weak hands. Thy words have upholden him that was falling. Thou hast strengthened the feeble knees. And there needs to be a consistency of conversation that says this, hey, come on. Do you know friends cannot be friends without getting together and doing something for someone? Do you know what keeps you on even keel and what keeps me on even keel is not us getting together and crying about the problems in our life. It's us getting together and saying this, we got problems. But there's somebody else out here that has it much worse than we do. And come on, let's go. Is it not true that about the time that you gripe about your electric bill, you go past a house where there is no electricity? I used to tell my mom all the time, Mom, I don't like my shoes. She said, praise God, you got feet to put in bad shoes. There are people who don't even have feet, son. And I think that what tools do you use when a friend goes into a depressed state? When they go through this and they're just not coming out, you know what you do? You step up and you say, look, let me tell you something. Look what it says here. Behold, thou hast instructed many. Thou hast strengthened the weak hands. Thy words have upholden him that was falling, and thou hast strengthened the feeble knees. If I could get every set of friends to be active, meeting people's needs. This is the reservoir of memories that you reach back into when your friend is going through a difficult time that turns into a depressed time. Mrs. Zinn's not here tonight. She's with her daughter. But brother, Brother Paul, when y'all first got here, she came right up and she got y'all to the house, right? Here's Mrs. Zinn, just lost her husband, and so I'm trying to get them acclimated to church. And she had me beat. I'm going to tell on her. When she misses church, she doesn't archive, trust me. And here is Mrs. Zinn, widow Mrs. Zinn, with her knees on the back of that pew like this, going, how about y'all come over for dinner? Y'all come on over. Then she looked at Brother Jeff and Miss Mindy Camden and said, okay, now y'all need to come with them. Y'all went over there, didn't you? Did you have a good time? Yeah. And we are all about, man, how does somebody lose their husband and they're that? Let me tell you how. They understand. I was put here to strengthen. This is the key. I like I said last week, I am not a psychiatrist. I got 8 minutes and 40 seconds on the clock. I am not a psychiatrist. I am not a therapist. I'm a pastor. And I have to look at everything through the eyes of Scripture. There are some conditions that do require medicine. And please, if the conclusion has come that for whatever reason, chemically, or whatever's going on, that somebody says this will stabilize you. I used to think that medicine for people was a crock, and that everything that was wrong, it was a spiritual thing. I had to get over that. One day, a dear lady that even to this day, she'll pop up in my world and say, thank you for understanding. She said, you're going to go with me to my therapist. And I was like, yeah, whatever. I ain't going. We went. That therapist looked at me and said, Brother Gray, I wasn't pastoring at the time, and said, Brother Gray, you don't believe any of this, do you? And I said, Doc, with all due respect, you're crazy. She's crazy. And that's all there is to this one. And he said, wow, what a spiritual leader you are. And he put me in my place. He said, let me show you the human head. He educated me for about 15, 20 minutes on what happens when chemically something goes wrong on the inside of a human brain. I had no idea. I looked at him and said, I am sorry. I looked at her, and she watches ever so often. She'll testify. I looked at her and said, would you please forgive me? I had no idea. I don't think we understand that when people lose things around them, it's traumatic. When you lose who you were inside and you lose that worth, it's even more traumatic. And then they need somebody around them that says this: if you were never born, then there are a lot of people who would have missed a blessing. So I would tell you, the best thing you could ever do with your friends is go champion a cause for somebody else. Get together and say this: come on, man, let's go help somebody. Come on, let's get. And that's why you do this now. Do you know what the Great Commission is truly? The Great Commission is creating memories to pull from when life gets bad. Knocking on doors and talking to people about Jesus Christ. Telling people about the Savior. Looking at their homes. Kelly and I dropped off some diapers to that man. I said, hey, bring some diapers. He has 2 twins. There's diapers sitting in there right now we need to take. Y'all are incredible. Y'all are just incredible. But I'll tell you what it does when you start getting active and you help people. Humanitarianism is when you just give to meet a physical need. Christianity is when you give to meet a physical need with the purpose of getting them Christ. That's Christianity. But regardless if it's humanitarianism or Christianity, just get out and do something. There ought to be something that people say, hey, do you remember? I meet old members all the time. And every time I see Dennis Harless, I start laughing. Dennis Harless is driving this soul winning bus, and we're over there off of Highway 80, down by the hospital down there. I mean, it's a flat-nosed, big old bus. We got like 70 teenagers on there. And when he turns the corner, you know, a big flat-nosed bus, you turn. You don't turn. You turn. Well, out there by that laundromat, out there on 5th Street, there's a steel barrier. He hiked that long 70-passenger bus up on that thing. We are tilting. And I'm standing in the door, and I look back and said, all the girls to this side. Well, all the guys were on this side. Those girls were like, oh, yeah. The guys were like, oh, yeah, come to our side. It's one of those type of things to where all the guys and girls are piled in the one side of the bus. Brother Harless is saying, it's a good thing we don't have cameras on this bus. Then I was like, oh, no, girls, go back. And that bus went, I said, no, girls, come back. And the is, what am I going to do? Every time I see Dennis Harless, I just start laughing. They are memories. Let me ask you a question. If your friend was in a dark place, have you created memories with your friends that justifies their living? This is why do stuff with your kids. Make memories with your kids. Grab your kids and say, come on, we're going to go do something for somebody. Make something, take it over there. Do something, because here is this, and the prevention is the fact that, hey, you have helped people. You say, well, what if that doesn't work? Well, it didn't work with Job. Because look at Job chapter 4 and look at verse number 5. Because his friend realized, but now it is come upon thee. Thou faintest, it touches thee. Thou art troubled. Is not this thy fear, thy confidence, thy hope, the uprightness of thy way? Everything Job was doing was in the fact, listen to this, that he could help other people. But he couldn't even help himself. That's what these 2 verses are literally talking about. You know what it's saying? Look at it, read it in this context. But now it is come upon thee. What is it referring to? Go back to verse 3 and verse 4. Now your hands are weak. Now you're falling. Now you have feeble knees. You know what his friend is saying? This is so, when somebody starts going into this, listen, you have to pull back and grab these memories. But what his friend was saying, Job, listen to this. The reason that you are some of the reasons why we're going through this on the inside is because you helped all these people, but now you can't even help yourself. It's the old adage, who has the worst plumbing in America? Plumbers. Whose house is always falling down? Carpenters. And who at times have the worst children and marriages? Pastors. And here's why. We can help everybody else's marriage and we can help everybody else's children, but there is one word that prevents us from getting help. And you know what it is? Pride. Pride. My wife asked me a very good question some time ago. She said, Bob, who do you call? You know what I said? Ain't none of your business who I call, because I'm going to tell you right now, I got it all together. Yeah, right. Yeah, like, no. Listen, there comes a point, and this is what his friend was trying to tell him in these verses. What his friend is trying to tell him is this: look, it's okay if you can't help yourself. It's okay. No, I must be the world person because I need to pull out of this. I've helped all these. Why can't I pull out of this? And you know what his friend was saying? It's okay. Instead of a calm support that Job should have been to himself, that he was to everybody. Here's how it went for Job. My world's falling apart. Job. Yes, you'll be okay. So here's what you do. Let me strengthen your hands. Let's kind of get up and let's kind of take this down. Next. My marriage is just like, okay, so what we do is you go home and let's just do it this way. Trust me, it'll be okay. And then all of a sudden, it started happening to him. And his friend was quick to say, if you'll look at Job 4 and verse number 6, is not this thy fear? So subsequent from here, now all your confidence, your hope, and your uprightness is now in your fear. That's what these verses are saying. Everything that you're going through now is in your fear. You are living, your confidence is in fear. Can I ask you a question? How much confidence is there when you're scared half to death? You don't. The things you were good at, you're not good at anymore. If you'll look in, and then I'm going to end with this, and then I have clearance from the Lord right now to pick up next week. But if you'll look at verse number 4, thy words have upholden him that was falling. Thou hast strengthened the feeble knees. But now as it come upon thee, thou faintest, it touches thee. Thou art troubled. Is not this thy fear and thy confidence, thy hope and the uprightness of thy ways? It's a question. Job, do you understand what you're doing? Okay, so then if you would, look at verse 7. Remember, I pray thee, who ever perished being innocent, or were the righteous cut off? Even as I have seen, they that plow iniquity and sow wickedness reap the what, please? By the blast of God they perish, and by the breath of his nostrils are they consumed. The roaring of a lion, the voice of the fierce lion, the teeth of the young lions are broken. The old lion perishes, the lack of prey. The stout lion's whelps are scattered abroad. Now a thing was secretly brought to me, and mine ears received a little thereof, in thoughts from the visions of the night, when deep sleep falleth to them. I'm going to deal with that later. But I want you to look back up. A lot of times people look at this as accusatory. Job, see, and I've heard people preach it. I have preached it. Yep, Job, see. No, it goes back to the end of chapter 3. Look at the end of chapter 3. Here's what Job said. Wherefore is light given to him that is in misery, and the life unto the bitter in soul. Verse 20. Which, what, please? Long for what? Death, but it, what, please? And dig for it more than for hid treasures, which rejoice exceedingly and are glad when they find the grave. Do you know what he was saying? What his friend was saying, this Job, whoever survives wickedness, they don't. Listen, God kills them. But the fact you're still alive means you don't fit in that category. You see, our conversation with people that are going through it needs to be this: the fact God has not wiped you off the face of the earth means that God still wants you on the earth. And that people who go home, I'm going to end with this, if you will. Aren't they cute? Go to Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1, please. So much to say, and then we're going to get out of here. I have a 5-minute window, 8:15 to 8:20, because everybody's starting. Look at Romans chapter 1, and I want you to look at verse number 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against what, please? All ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold truth and unrighteousness, because that they may be known of God. Look, if you go all the way down to verse number 21. Because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imagination, professing themselves to be wise. Look at verse 23, and changed the glory of the uncorruptible God into images made like. Look at verse 24. Look at what starts to happen. Wherefore God also gave them up to uncleanness through the lust of their own bodies, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves, who changed the truth of God. Look at verse 26. For this cause God gave them up unto vile affection. And look, if you don't mind, and go down to verse 28. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over. If Job, what does it say about Job? He was perfect. He feared God. He eschewed evil. Listen to this. People who don't want God, God gives them over, and then he gives them up. Here's why. So that the devil can have their way with them to destroy the body so that the soul might be saved. And what we must say is this, when we're dealing with people who are in a little bit of a dark place, listen, I think my concluding homework for y'all, start helping people create good memories. And then when somebody says, why won't God let me die? You know what the answer is? Because he's not done with you yet. And you are not as bad as what you think you are. You're not as bad as what you think you are. Now, regardless of what we think about Job's friend, and there's little things going on. Wow. Okay, regardless of what is going on, I will tell you this. At the end of Job's life, Job has one last conversation with God, and then God blesses him.
Thank you for being with us during this service. My prayer is always, as I study, that God would use his word to speak to people's hearts. And may you have a good day, a good week. Please know that if we can do anything for you here at Emmanuel, all you have to do is let me know. God bless you, my friend. Have a wonderful day.